Hello, everyone. We're going to be reading Jim Butcher's A Summer Night. We are on chapter 17. If you've missed any of the other chapters or any of the other books, please do go look in the playlists below, and we'll go ahead and get started here on chapter 17. I laid Elaine out, first thing, and tried to determine the extent of her injuries. Her forearms had been laced open in several places, but the worst injury was on her back, just inside on her left clavicle, a nasty puncture wound. The edges of it had puckered closed, but it hadn't stopped bleeding completely, and if she was bleeding internally, she could be done for. I would need both hands to put pressure on the wound. No help was on the way. There was little I could do for her, so I picked her up and put her in the back of the Beetle, then jumped in myself and started the ignition. "Hang in there, Elaine," I said. "I'm getting you to a hospital. You're going to be all right." She shook her head. No, too dangerous." "You're hurt too badly for me to take care of it," I said. "Relax. I'll be with you." She opened her eyes and said with a sudden, surprising insistence, "No hospitals. They'll find me there." I started up the car. "Damn it, Elaine. What else am I supposed to do?" She closed her eyes again. Her voice grew fainter by the word. "Aurora. Summer. Rothschild Hotel. There's an elevator in the back. She'll help." "The Summer lady?" I demanded. "You're joking, right?" She didn't answer me. I looked over at her, and my heart all but stopped, and I saw her head lolling, her body slumped. I jammed the Beetle into gear and jounced out onto the road. "Rothschild Hotel," I murmured. "More ferries. Keen." I got us to the hotel, one of the nice places among the shores of Lake Michigan. I skipped the huge valet-littered front drive and zipped the Beetle into the back parking lot, looking for some kind of service drive, a freight elevator, or maybe just a door with a sign on it that said, "Summer Court of the Ferries, this way." I felt a slight warmth on my ear, and then LDL zoomed out in front of my face and bumped up against the window. I rolled the window down a bit, and the tiny ferry streaked out ahead of my car, guiding me to the back of the lot. She stopped, circling an unobtrusive, unlit breezeway. Then she sped away, her task evidently completed. I quickly parked the car and set the brake. Elaine may have been slender, but she had too much muscle to be light. She'd always had the build of a long-distance runner, long, lean, and strong. She was only just conscious enough to make a little easier for me to carry her, wrapping her arms around my neck and leaning her shoulder on my shoulder. She trembled, and I felt cold. Sorry about that, guys. Let's continue. Doubt gnawed at me, and I took her down the breezeway. Maybe I should have ignored her and gone to the hospital. I kept going until it became too dark to see, and I started to put Elaine down so that I could take out my amulet to make some light. Just as I did, a pair of elevator doors swept open, spilling light and canned music onto the breezeway. A girl stood in the doors. She was 5-0, 100-0. Her sunny hair pulled back into a braid. She wore a blue t-shirt with white painter's overalls, and she was liberally splattered with flecks of what looked like clay. Her rosy mouth opened in dismay as she saw me standing there with Elaine. "Oh no!" she exclaimed. She beckoned me urgently. "Come on, get her inside. The lady can see to her." My arms and shoulders had begun to burn with the effort of supporting Elaine, so I didn't waste time talking. I shuffled forward into the elevator and leaned against the back wall with a wheeze. The girl closed the elevator doors, took a key from the overall pocket, and inserted it into a solitary keyhole where you would expect a bunch of buttons to be. The elevator gave a little lurch and started up. "What happened to Ella?" the girl asked me. She looked from me to Elaine and chewed on one lip. Ella? Beats me. I found her like this in my car. She told me to bring her here. Oh, God, the girl said. She looked at me again. You're with Winter, aren't you? I frowned. How did you know? She shrugged. It shows. I'm with Winter for now. But it's a one-shot sort of deal. Think of me as a free agent. Perhaps, but an agent of Winter all the same. Are you sure you want to be here? No, I said, but I'm sure I'm not leaving Elaine until I'm convinced she's in good hand. The girl frowned. Oh. Can't this thing go any faster? My shoulders burned. My back ached. My bruises were complaining, and I could feel Elaine's breathing going weaker. I had to fight not to scream in sheer frustration. I wished there had been a bank of buttons to push, just so I could have slammed the right button a bunch of times in a senseless effort to speed the elevator up. The doors opened a geological epoch later, onto a scene of Incragerus as a gorilla in a garter belt. The elevator had taken us to what could only have been the roof of the hotel, assuming the roof opened up to a section of the rainforest in Borneo. Trees and greenery grew so thick that I couldn't see the edge of the roof, and though I could hear the nighttime noises of Chicago, the sounds were vague in the distance and could almost not be heard over the buzz of locusts and the chittering of some kind of animal I did not recognize. Wind rustled the forest around me, and silver moonlight, brighter than I would have thought possible, gave everything an eerie, surreal beauty. I am so glad. I was going out for more clay just then. This way, the girl said, and started off on a trail through the forest. I followed as quickly as I could, puffing hard to keep holding Elaine. It wasn't a long walk. The trail wound back and forth and then opened onto a grassy glade. I stooped and looked around. No, not a glade. More like a garden. A pool rested at its center, still water reflecting the moon overhead. Benches and stones of a good size for sitting on were strewn around the landscape. Statuary, most of it marble and of human subjects, stood here and there, often framed by flowers or placed between young trees. On the far side of the pool stood what at first glance I took to be a gnarled tree. It wasn't. It was a throne of living wood. Its trunk grown into the correct shape, branches and leaves spreading above it in stately elegance, roots spreading and anchoring it to the earth. People stood here and there. A paint-splattered young man worked furiously on some sort of portrait, his face set in concentration. A tall man, his ageless beauty and pale hair marking him as one of the Sidhe, stood in the posture of a teacher beside a slender girl who was drawing back a bow, aiming at the target of a bundle of branches. On the far side of the glade, smoke rose from stones piled into the shade of an oven or a forge, and a broad-chested man, shirtless, bearded, heavy-browed, and fierce-looking, stood on the other side of it, wielding a smith's hammer in a regular rhythm. He stepped away from the forge, a glowing hot blade gripped in the set of tongs, and dunked it into the trough of silvery water. When I got a better look at him, I understood what he was. Steam rose in a cloud over his heavy equine forelegs, then over his human belly and broad chest, and the centaur stamped a rear hoof impatiently, muttering under his breath, while colored lights played back and forth in the water of the trough. Haunting pipe music, sad and lovely, drifted through the glade from a young woman, mortal, sitting with a set of reed pipes, playing with her eyes closed. "Where is she?" I demanded. "Where?" Sorry about that. "Where is the lady?" The centaur's head snapped around, and he snarled in a sudden, harsh basso. He took up his hammer again, whipped it in quick circle and started toward me at a slow canter, Clydesdale-side hooves striking the ground with dull thumps. "Winter bound! Here! It cannot be borne!" I tensed, holding Elaine a little closer, and my heart lurched into a higher gear. The centaur was huge and looked ready to kill. "Whoa there, big fella, I'm not looking for trouble." The centaur bared his teeth at me and spoke, his deep voice filled with outrage. "There you stand with our emissary's blood on your hands and expect us to believe you." The tall she-man barked, "Korak, hold!" The centaur drew up short, rearing onto his hind legs and kicking at the air with heavy hooves. "My lord Talus," he growled in frustration, "this arrogance cannot be tolerated." "Peace," the she-lord said. "But my lord!" The she-lord stepped between me and the centaur, his back to me. He wore close-fit trousers of dark green and a loose shirt of white linen. The she-lord said nothing, and I couldn't see his expression. But the centaur's face reddened, then blanched. He bowed his head, the stiff gesture, and then walked back over his forge, hooves striking the ground in sharp, angry motions. The she, Talos, I presumed, turned back to me and regarded me with calm, feline eyes the color of the summer sky. He had the pale eye of the she hanging in the straight, fine sheet to brush his shoulders. There was a quality of quiet confidence in his features, of relaxed strength, and the sense of him was somehow less alien than that of most of the she I had encountered. "I hope you will not judge Cornac too harshly, sir. You are, I take it, Harry Dresden. If I'm not, he's going to be upset with me when he catches me running around in his underpants." Talos smiled. The expression came easily to his features. "Then I grant you passport and license. In agreement with the accords, I am Talos, Lord Marshal of the Summer Court." "Yeah, that's great. Nice to meet you," I said. "Hey, do you think you could help me save this woman's life now?" The she's smile faded. "I will do what I can." He glanced to the side and gestured with a roll of his wrist. The garden flew into activity. A cloud of pixie darted through the air, bearing stalks of green plants and broad, soft leaves. They piled them into a soft-looking mound near the side of the pool. Talos looked at me for permission and then gently took Elaine's weight into his shoulders. My shoulders and biceps all but screamed in relief. The she-lord carried Elaine to the bed of leaves and laid her down upon it. He touched her throat and then her brow with one hand, his eyes closing. "Weak," he said quietly, "and cold, but she still has strength yet in her. She will be all right for a little while. No offense, but your people have some odd notions about time. Go get your lady. She needs to see Elaine now." Talos regarded me with that same quiet, opaque expression. "She will be here when she will be here. I cannot hurry the sunrise, nor the lady." I started to tell him where he could stick his sunrise, but I bit back the words and tried to take out some frustration by clenching my fists. My knuckles popped. A hand touched my arm, and the girl, the sculptor from the elevator, said, "Please, sir, let me get you something to drink, or some food. Mortal food, I mean. I wouldn't offer the other kind." "Like hell," I said. "Not until Elaine is taken care of." From where he knelt beside Elaine, Talos lifted both his eyebrows and he shrugged his shoulders. "As you wish." He rested his fingertips lightly on either side of her face and bowed his head. "My skills are rather limited. I can at least assure that she loses no more ground." There was a quiet surge of energy, something as gentle and strong as the weight of the wave lifting you off your feet. Elaine suddenly took a deep breath. The color came back into her cheeks. She blinked her eyes open for a moment, then sighed and closed them again. "Talos can sustain her for a time," the girl said, "until the lady decides. She has been Ella's guardian and friend for several years." She tugged at my arm. "Please, take something to eat. You'll make us poor hosts if you do not." My stomach growled again, and my throat started to complain after all the hard breathing I'd been doing. I exhaled through my nose and nodded to the girl, who led me to one of the benches not far away and pulled a plastic Coleman cooler from underneath it. She rummaged inside, then tossed me a cold can of Coke, a small bag of potato chips, and a long hoagie. None of them held any of the subtle, quivering lure of the fairy fae. "Best I can do for now," she said. "Turkey subs sound all right?" "Marry me," I responded, tore into the food with fervor, and spent a couple of minutes indulging in one of the purest primal pleasures, eating. Food never tastes so good as when you're starving, and Talos had granted me safe passport under the Accords, so I wasn't worried about any drugs in it. While I ate, the girl drew a short strand over to her, on which was a clay bust of a young woman. Parts of it, still rough, still marked in the tracks of her fingers. She dipped them into a bowl of water attached to the stand and started to work on the bust. "What happened to her?" she asked. "Hell if I know," I said between bites. "She was in my car like that. Wanted me to bring her here." "Why did you?" She flushed. "I mean, you're working for Summer's enemies, right?" "Yeah, but it doesn't mean I'm friendly with them." I shook my head, washed down a half-chewed bite with a long drink of Coke. Heaven. I ate for a moment more and then frowned at the bust she was working on. The face seemed familiar. I studied it for a bit, then asked, "Is that Lily?" The girl blinked at me. "You know her?" "Of her," I said. "She's a changeling, isn't she?" The girl nodded. "Winter. But she hasn't chosen to go over to them. She was under Ronald's protection, and she models for us sometimes." She gestured vaguely toward the young man who was painting intently. "See, there are a few other pieces she's modeled for around here." I looked around the garden and picked out a pair of statues among all the rest. Both were nudes of white marble. One of them depicted the girl in a tiptoe stretch, arms over her head, body arched prettily. The other showed her kneeling, looking at something cupped in her hands, her expression one of quiet sadness. Seems like she was well liked." The girl nodded. "She's very gentle, very sweet." "Very missing," I said. She frowned. "Missing?" "Yeah. Her roommate asked me to see if I could find her." "Have you seen her in the past couple of days?" "She hasn't been here to model, and I've never seen her anywhere but here. I'm sorry." "Worth a shot," I asked. "Why are you looking for her?" "I told you. Her roommate asked me for my help. I gave it, which was mostly true. Technically, I supposed. I'd sold it. I got the uneasy feeling that I might start feeling too guilty over the cash Merrill had given me to spend it. I'm a tad busy this week, but I'll do what I can." The girl's brow furrowed. "Has she worked at the bust?" "You're not like anyone else I've ever met who has worked with Winter. Mab usually likes her agents colder, I think, hungrier, more cruel." I shrugged. "She wanted someone to find a killer. I've had some experience." She nodded. "Still, you seem like a decent enough person. Makes me sad to think that you've gotten entangled in Winter's snares." I stopped chewing and looked up at her. "Oh, hell's bells." She looked at me and lifted an eyebrow. I put the sandwich down and said, "You're her. You're the summer lady." The shadow of a smile touched the girl's lips, and she bowed her head toward me. Her blonde hair cleared out to shea white. Her fingers and limbs suddenly seemed slightly longer, and her features became almost identical to Mav's, eyes vertically slitted and almost violently green. She still wore the coveralls and blue t-shirt, and was still liberally covered in flecks of clay, though. They stood out in sharp contrast to her fair skin and pale hair. "Call me Aurora," she said. "It's a little easier for everyone." Right," I said. I finished the bite I was on and said, "So, are you going to stop playing games with me and help Elaine, Aurora?" She glanced over at Elaine, lying on the ground, and her expression grew troubled. "That depends." My teeth clenched, and I said in a falsely pleasant voice, "On what?" She turned her calm, inhuman eyes to me. "On you." "Don't go getting specific on me now," I said. "I wouldn't know how to handle it." "Do you think this is a joke, Mr. Dresden? A game?" "I know damn well it isn't a game." She shook her head. "And that is where you are wrong. it is a game. But unlike the ones you know, you aren't allowed to know the rules to this game. And it was never intended to be fair. Do you know why Mab chose you, wizard? I glared at her. No. Neither do I, she said. And that is my part of the game. Why choose you? It must be because she expects something of you that she would get from no one else. Perhaps bringing Ella here is what she expected. What's the difference? I demanded. Elena's hurt. Your emissary has been wounded in the line of duty. Don't you think you should get her moving again? But if that is what winter expects, it could be used against me. I am the least queen of summer, but even so I must be cautious in the use of my power. I snorted. Mav sure as hell doesn't think that way. Of course not, she said. She's winter. She's violent, vicious, and merciless. And your centaur is just the soul of gentleness and understanding. Aurora sighed and lowered her clay-crusted fingers. I hope you will forgive Coric's temper. He is usually a merrier sort. Everyone's been edgy because of matters here. Uh-huh, I said. Just so we're clear, that was really mortal food, wasn't it? Yes, she said. I have no desire to threaten your freedom, Mr. Dresden, or to bind you in any way. Good. I knew she couldn't lie to me, so I took another bite of the sandwich and some more chips. Look, I'm not here to try to undermine your power or sabotage summer, Aurora. I just want you to help Elaine. I know, she said. I believe you, but I still don't trust you. What reason do you have not to trust me? I've watched you, she responded. You're a mercenary. You work for hire. Yeah, to pay bills and... She lifted a hand. You've made bargains with demons. Nickel and dime stuff. Nothing huge, or you traded yourself to the Lenanchi for power. When I was younger, and a hell of a lot stupider, and in trouble. Her inhuman eyes met mine, penetrating. You've killed. I looked away from her. There wasn't much to say to that. My stomach turned, and I pushed the food a bit away from me. Aurora nodded slowly. From the beginning, you have been meant to be a destroyer, a killer. Do you know the original purpose of a godparent, Mr. Dresden? Yeah, I said. I felt tired. A godparent was chosen to ensure that a child had religious and moral guidance and teaching. Indeed, she said, and your godmother, your teacher and guide, is the most vicious creature of Mab's court. More than Mab's equal, second in strength only to Mab herself. I let out a harsh laugh. Teacher? Guide? Is that what you think Lee is to me? Isn't she? Lee barely noticed me except when she thought she could get something from me, I spat. The rest of the time she couldn't care less. The only thing she taught me was that if I didn't want to get walked on, I had to be smarter than her, stronger than her, and willing to do something about it. Aurora turned her lovely face fully toward me and regarded me with deep, quiet eyes. Yes? Unease gnawed at my belly as she continued. The strong conqueror, and the weak are conquered. That is winter. That is what you have learned. She leaned closer and said quietly, emphatic, that is what makes you dangerous. Do you see? I stood up and walked a few paces away. Aurora didn't say anything. I heard drips of water as she washed her hands in the little bowl. If you aren't going to help Elaine, tell me. I'll take her to a hospital. Do you think I should help her? I don't give a damn if you do or not, I said, but one way or another, I'm going to make sure she's taken care of. Make up your mind now. I have already. What remains is for you to make up yours. I took a weary breath before asking, meaning? Of the two people who entered this garden, Mr. Dresden, Elaine is not the most grievously wounded. You are. Like hell. I've just got some cuts and bruises. She rose and walked toward me. Those aren't the wounds I meaned. She reached out and laid a slender hand over my heart. Her skin was warm, even through my shirt, and the simple fact of her touch brought me a small but noticeable sense of comfort. Susan had been gone for months, and with the exception of the occasional assault, no one had actually touched me. She looked up at me and nodded. You see, you've been badly wounded, Mr. Dresden, and you have found neither rest nor respite from your pains. I'll live. True, she said, but that is where it always begins. Monsters are born of pain and grief and loss and anger. Your heart is full of all of them. I shrugged. And it makes you vulnerable to Mab's influence, to temptations that would normally be unthinkable. I'm handling temptation pretty damned well, thank you. But for how long? You need to heal, wizard. Let me help you. I frowned at her and at her hand. How? Aurora gave me a small, sad smile. I'll show you. Here. Her palm pressed a bit closer to me, and somewhere inside me a dam broke open. Emotions welled up like a rituous rainbow. Scarlet rage, indigo fear, pale blue sadness, arching yellow loneliness, putrid green guilt. The tide flooded through me, coursed over me like a bolt of lightning, searing and painful and beautiful all at once. After the tide receded, a deep, quiet stillness followed. A sensation of warmth suffused me, gently easing away my aches and bruises. It spread over my skin like sunlight on a lazy afternoon outside, and with the warmth my cares began to evaporate. My fear vanished, and I began to relax muscles I hadn't realized were stretched tight as the warmth spread. I floated into warmth for a time, then released from pain and ecstasy in itself. When I came back to my senses, I was lying on the back in the grass, staring up at leaves and silver-starred sky. My head lay in Aurora's lap. She knelt behind me, and her hands rested lightly, warm and soft, along the sides of my face. The pain began to return to my body, thoughts and heart, like some quiet and odious tide washing in garbage from the polluted sea. I heard myself make small sounds of protest. Aurora looked down at me, her eyes concerned. Worse than I ever suspected. You didn't even realize how much pain you were in, did you? My chest heaved, and I let out a quiet sob. The warmth faded entirely, and the sheer weight of the difficulties I had to face pressed down on me, suffocating me. Aurora said, Please, let me help you. We'll make it a bargain, Mr. Dresden. Desist. Relax your efforts to help Winter. Stay here for a time, and let me grant you a measure of peace. Real tears formed, making my vision blurred. I mopped at my face with my hands, struggling to think clearly. If I took the deal, it would probably mean my ass. Backing off from Mab's offer would mean that I didn't get a good outcome for the White Council, which meant they would buy peace with the Red Court of Vampires for the low, low price of one Harry Dresden, slightly damaged. Forget it, I said, my voice weak. I've got a job to do. Aurora closed her eyes for a moment and nodded. At least you are true to your word, Mr. Dresden. Your honor is admirable, even if it is misguided. I forced myself to sit up, away from Aurora. Go on, I said. Help Elaine. I will, she assured me, but she is in no danger for the moment, and it will take me some time. There is something I wish to say to you first. Okay. Talk. How much did Mab tell you about Ronald's death? I shook my head. That he was dead. That the mantle of power he wore went missing. That the killer had to be found. Did she tell you why? I frowned. Not exactly. Aurora nodded and folded her hands in her lap. Summer readies to go to war against Winter. I frowned. You mean it's not just a theoretical possibility anymore? It's real? I know no other kind of war. The loss of the summer night has forced Summer's hands. I'm not sure I follow. Her pale brow knit into a soft frown. The power of our nights is considerable. It carries a sort of weight that only a free mortal can possess. That power, that influence, is a critical element of the balance between our courts. Except now yours is gone. Exactly. Which makes Summer weaker. Yes. I nodded. Then why the hell are you planning to attack? The seasons are changing. Aurora said. "In 2 days' time, midsummer will be upon us, the height of summer's strength." She said nothing more, letting me do the math. "You think winter has taken away your night," I said. "And if you wait, you're only going to grow more and more weak while winter gets stronger, right?" "Correct. If we are to have any chance of victory, we must strike at the peak of our strength. It will be the only time when our court might be near equal to the winter's strength. Otherwise, the seasons will change, and at midwinter Mab and her creatures will come for us, and they will destroy us, and with us the balance of the mortal world." She lifted her green eyes from her hands to my face. "Winter, Mr. Dresden. Endless winter. Unending and vicious cycles of predator and prey. Such a world would not be kind to mortals." I shook my head. "Why would winter pull this now? I mean, if they had waited another couple of days, they could have held all the cards. Why leave you enough space to wriggle out?" "I cannot even pretend to know the mind of winter," Aurora said. "But I know that they must not be allowed to destroy us, for your sake as well as for ours." "Boy, everybody's looking out for my best interests." "Wizard, please, promise me that you will do what you can to stop them." "I am finished making promises." I stood up and started for the path that led back to the elevator and out. But part of me wanted to do nothing but to return to the comfort Aurora had offered. I paused, squeezed my eyes shut, focusing my resolve. But I will say this. I'm going to find the killer and straighten this out. I'm going to do it before midsummer. I didn't bother to add, because I'm as good as dead if I don't. No need to belabor the obvious. Thank you very much for listening to Chapter 17 of the Dresden Files, Summer Night. Please do subscribe, like my channel, help keep it growing. Please do also go out and buy the Jim Butcher books. They are wonderful, wonderful books. Again, thank you very much, and you all have a great day.